Mother's Day always brings a strange mix of emotions for me: pride, nostalgia, and, if I'm honest, a little ache that never quite goes away. This year, the morning sun was streaming through my kitchen window as I arranged the flowers I'd bought for myself. I was just about to pour my second cup of coffee when my phone rang. It was my son Daniel. My heart did its usual flutter. He's a busy man. A millionaire now, always on the move, and calls from him are rare enough to feel precious. "Happy Mother's Day." "Mom," he said, his voice warm but hurried, as if he was already thinking about the next thing on his schedule. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, and I tried to ignore the slight distance in his tone, the way he always sounds like he's speaking from another world entirely. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Mom, do you like the $5,000 Clara gives you?" For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. The question hung in the air, heavy and awkward, as if he'd dropped a stone into a still pond. I felt my cheeks flush, my mind scrambling for the right response. Did I like it? What was I supposed to say? I stammered something about being grateful, but the truth was, I'd never known how to feel about those envelopes Clara handed me every Mother's Day, always with a polite smile, always with Daniel standing just a little too far away. His question made me realize how little I understood about the arrangement, about what it meant to him, to Clara, or even to me. Was it a gift or a transaction? A gesture of love or something else entirely? I could hear Clara's voice in the background, faint but unmistakable, and suddenly I felt like an outsider in my own family. That single question unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. It was as if Daniel had pulled back a curtain I didn't even know was there, revealing shadows I'd been too afraid to look at. I never expected a simple question to unravel everything I thought I knew about my family. There was a time when Daniel was the center of my world, and I was his. I still remember the first night I brought him home from the hospital, how tiny he felt in my arms, how his little fingers curled around mine as if he never wanted to let go. Back then, it was just the two of us against the world. His father left before Daniel could even form a memory of him, and I was left to pick up the pieces, to build a life for us from scratch. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. There were nights I'd come home so exhausted I could barely stand, but I'd still sit at the edge of Daniel's bed, reading him stories until his eyelids fluttered shut. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I made his lunches every morning, packed with little notes to remind him how much I loved him. On weekends, we'd go to the park, and I'd push him on the swings until he was breathless with laughter. I remember the way he'd run to me after school, his backpack bouncing, eager to tell me about his day. Those were the years when I felt most needed, most alive. Every sacrifice felt worth it when I saw the light in his eyes. I always told myself that if I worked hard enough, Daniel would have opportunities I never did. I wanted him to dream big, to reach for things I could only imagine. When he got a scholarship to college, I cried tears of pride and relief. I watched him grow into a man, ambitious, driven, and so smart it sometimes took my breath away. He called me every Sunday, no matter how busy he was, and I cherished those conversations, even as they grew shorter and more hurried with each passing year. Then he met Clara. I remember the first time he brought her home, how nervous he seemed, how eager he was for me to like her. Clara was beautiful, poised, and confident in a way that made me feel both proud and a little intimidated. She brought flowers and a bottle of wine, and she complimented my cooking with a practiced smile. I wanted so much to welcome her, to believe that she would love Daniel as fiercely as I did. I told myself that this was what I'd always hoped for, a partner who would cherish him, a new branch on our little family tree. At first, things seemed promising. Clara was attentive, always asking about my health, sending cards on my birthday, inviting me to dinners. But there was a formality to her kindness, a sense of distance I couldn't quite bridge. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just nerves, that we'd grow closer with time. Daniel seemed happy, and that was all that mattered to me. But as the years passed, I began to feel the shift. Daniel's calls became less frequent, our conversations more superficial. He was always busy, meetings, business trips, social events. When we did speak, it was often Clara who answered the phone, her voice polite but brisk, as if she were managing a schedule rather than welcoming a mother-in-law. Invitations to family gatherings became rare, and when I did attend, I felt like a guest in their home. Not family. I tried to tell myself it was just the natural order of things, that children grow up and build lives of their own, but the ache of being sidelined never quite faded. I missed the boy who used to run into my arms, the young man who called me for advice, the son who once made me feel like I was the most important person in his world. Now, on days like Mother's Day, I find myself looking back on those early years, searching for the thread that connects who we were to who we've become. I wonder if Daniel remembers the sacrifices I made, the nights I stayed up sewing costumes for his school plays, the mornings I woke before dawn to make sure he never missed the bus. I wonder if he knows how much I still love him, even as I stand on the outside looking in. Clara is a part of our family now, and I want to believe there's room for all of us. But sometimes, when I see the way Daniel looks at her, so full of trust and admiration, I can't help but feel a pang of jealousy, a fear that I've been replaced. I remind myself that this is what I wanted for him: happiness, success, a life filled with love. But I never imagined that in giving him everything, I might lose him in the process. The warmth of our past feels so far away now, replaced by a polite distance I can't seem to cross. I hold on to the memories of our closeness, even as I struggle to find my place in this new version of our family. And as I think back on all the sacrifices I made, I can't help but wonder if they were enough, or if, somewhere along the way, I gave too much of myself and forgot how to hold on. The first time Clara handed me that envelope, I remember feeling a strange mix of surprise and embarrassment. It was my third Mother's Day since Daniel and Clara had married, and I'd been invited to their new house for brunch. The place was immaculate, all glass and marble with a view of the city that made me feel small and out of place. Clara greeted me at the door with her usual grace, her smile perfectly measured, her eyes scanning me up and down as if checking for flaws. After we'd eaten, Clara's idea of brunch was more art than food. Tiny portions arranged on oversized plates. She handed me a cream-colored envelope. "Happy Mother's Day, Evelyn," she said, her voice warm but distant. "We wanted to do something special for you this year." I opened it, expecting maybe a card or a gift certificate. Instead, I found a check for $5,000, made out in Clara's neat handwriting. For a moment, I was speechless. I'd never received a gift like that in my life. My first instinct was to refuse it, to tell her it was too much, but Daniel was watching me, his expression unreadable. "It's just a little something," Clara said, waving away my protests. "You deserve to treat yourself." I thanked her, my cheeks burning, and tucked the envelope into my purse, feeling more awkward than grateful. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the check. I thought about all the things I could do with that money: fix the leaky roof, pay off some bills, maybe even take a short trip. But the more I thought about it, the more unsettled I felt. Was this really a gift, or was it something else? I'd always prided myself on my independence, on never asking Daniel for help, even when things were tight. Now, here I was, holding more money than I'd ever seen at once, and I didn't know how to feel. The next year, the same thing happened. Another envelope, another check, the same polite smile from Clara. It became a tradition, one I never asked for and never quite understood. Each time I thanked her, and each time I felt a little more uncomfortable. The money was always from Clara, never Daniel, and he never mentioned it unless I brought it up. I started to wonder if he even knew about the gifts, or if this was Clara's way of keeping me at arm's length, generous, but impersonal. As the years went by, the ritual became almost mechanical. I'd arrive for Mother's Day, exchange pleasantries, and wait for the envelope. Sometimes Daniel would be there, sometimes he'd be away on business, but Clara was always the one to hand me the check. I tried to convince myself it was her way of showing appreciation, but the gesture felt hollow, as if she were paying me off for my silence, or for staying out of their lives. I never told anyone about the money. Not my friends, not my sister, not even Daniel. It felt like a secret, one I was ashamed to admit. I used the money for practical things, never anything extravagant, and I always sent a thank you note, careful to keep my words neutral. But inside I was torn. Part of me was grateful after all. Who was I to turn down such generosity? But another part of me felt diminished, as if I were being bought off, reduced to a line item in their budget. The discomfort grew with each passing year. I started to dread Mother's Day, not because I didn't want to see Daniel, but because I couldn't bear the awkwardness of accepting that envelope. I wondered what Clara thought of me, if she saw me as a charity case, or if she resented having to include me at all. I wondered if Daniel noticed the tension, or if he was too busy to care. Sometimes, late at night, I'd lie awake and replay those moments in my mind. I'd remember the way Clara's eyes never quite met mine, the way Daniel seemed distracted, always checking his phone or glancing at his watch. I'd think about the years when a homemade card or a phone call was enough, when Daniel's love was something I never had to question. Now everything felt transactional, measured in dollars and cents instead of hugs and laughter. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that I was overthinking things. But the feeling of being an outsider in my own family only grew stronger. The money, instead of bringing us closer, became a wall between us, a reminder of all the things we no longer shared. Still, I never dared to ask where the money really came from until now. At first, I tried to convince myself that Clara's gestures were simply her way of showing care. She never forgot a birthday or holiday, always sent flowers or a card, and of course there was the annual Mother's Day envelope. But as time went on, I began to notice a pattern, a certain detachment in her kindness, as if every gesture was a box to be checked rather than a bridge to be built. The gifts were always expensive, always tasteful, but they felt more like obligations than acts of love. I started to wonder if Clara was keeping score, if every check and bouquet was meant to buy my silence, or perhaps my absence. It wasn't just the gifts. There were other smaller things that stung in ways I couldn't quite explain. I'd call Daniel to ask about his week, and more often than not, Clara would answer, her tone polite but clipped. "Daniel's in a meeting," she'd say, or, "He's just heading out the door, but I'll let him know you called." Sometimes, he'd call me back hours later. His voice distracted, the conversation rushed. I'd ask about his work, his health, his plans, but his answers were always brief, as if he were eager to get off the phone. I told myself he was busy, that this was just the way life was for people like him, always moving, always striving. But deep down, I missed the days when he'd call just to hear my voice, when he'd share his worries and dreams without hesitation. Family gatherings became less frequent, and when they did happen, I often found out about them after the fact. I'd see photos on social media, Daniel and Clara at a holiday dinner, surrounded by friends and colleagues, everyone smiling, glasses raised in a toast. I'd scroll through the pictures, searching for a glimpse of myself, only to realize I hadn't even been invited. When I asked Daniel about it, he'd apologize, saying it was a last-minute thing, or that they assumed I'd be busy. "You know how these things go, Mom," he'd say, his tone gentle but dismissive. "We'll do something together soon, I promise." But soon never seemed to come. I started to feel like a guest in my own family, someone to be managed rather than cherished. Clara would send me updates about their lives, an email about a new business venture, a text about a trip they were taking, but the messages were always impersonal, as if she were sending out a newsletter rather than reaching out to a loved one. When I tried to suggest a visit or a family dinner, there was always a reason it couldn't happen. "We're traveling that weekend," Clara would say, or "Daniel's got a big project at work." I tried to be understanding, to remind myself that they had their own lives. But the rejection still hurt. The few times I was included, I felt out of place. At their home, everything was immaculate, every detail curated to perfection. Clara would greet me with a smile, offer me a drink, and then disappear into the kitchen or onto the patio with her friends. Daniel would check in on me, but only briefly, before being pulled away by a phone call or a guest. I'd sit quietly, listening to the laughter and conversation around me, feeling invisible. I tried to join in, to share a story or a memory, but the conversation would quickly shift to topics I knew nothing about: business deals, travel plans, people I'd never met. I'd smile and nod, pretending to understand, all the while feeling the distance grow. I began to dread these gatherings, knowing I'd leave feeling lonelier than when I arrived. I missed the days when Daniel and I would spend hours talking over coffee, when he'd ask for my advice or share his worries. Now, our interactions felt scripted, as if we were playing roles in a play neither of us had auditioned for. I wondered if he noticed the change, if he missed me the way I missed him, or if he was content with the life he'd built, a life that seemed to have no room for me. Clara's generosity only made things more complicated. Every gift, every check, every carefully worded message felt like a reminder of my place, on the outside, looking in. I felt obligated to be grateful, to accept her kindness without question, but the truth was, I longed for something deeper. I wanted to be included, to be needed, to be loved for who I was, not for the role I played in their lives. I tried to talk to Daniel about how I was feeling, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't want to seem ungrateful or needy, didn't want to cause trouble between him and Clara. So I kept my feelings to myself, smiling through the discomfort, telling myself that this was just the way things were now. But the ache of exclusion grew with each passing year, a quiet sorrow that settled in my bones. Sometimes, I'd catch myself reminiscing about the past, about the little boy who used to run into my arms, the young man who called me his best friend. I'd wonder where that closeness had gone, if it was something I'd lost or something that had simply faded with time. I'd think about all the sacrifices I'd made, all the love I'd poured into raising him, and I'd wonder if it had all been for nothing. The distance between us wasn't just physical, it was emotional, a chasm that seemed to widen with every polite gesture, every missed invitation, every unanswered call. I tried to bridge the gap, to reach out, but my efforts were met with gentle rebuffs, as if I were being managed rather than embraced. In the quiet moments, I'd sit alone in my kitchen, staring at the latest bouquet from Clara, the latest check tucked away in a drawer, and I'd wonder if this was all I could expect from my family now. Generosity without warmth, inclusion without belonging. The realization stung, but I held on to hope, telling myself that things could still change, that Daniel might one day remember the bond we once shared. But as the years passed, that hope began to feel more like wishful thinking, a dream I couldn't quite let go of. And so I waited, longing for a sign that I still mattered, that I was still loved, not for what I could be given, but for who I was. There are nights when the silence in my house feels heavier than any words could ever be. I sit at the kitchen table, the same one where Daniel once did his homework, and I wonder if I've somehow become invisible to the people I love most. I replay every conversation, every missed call, every polite but distant message from Clara, searching for clues. Was it something I said, or something I failed to say? Did I hold on too tightly, or did I let go too soon? The questions swirl in my mind, each one cutting a little deeper than the last. I try to remind myself that Daniel is busy, that he has a demanding career and a wife who needs him. But the truth is, I can't shake the feeling that I'm no longer a priority in his life. I worry that I've become a burden, an obligation to be managed rather than a mother to be cherished. The gifts from Clara, the carefully worded updates, the rare invitations, they all feel like reminders of my new place on the periphery. I wonder if Daniel even notices my absence, or if he's grateful for the distance Clara has created between us. Sometimes the loneliness is too much to bear on my own. On those days, I call my sister Margaret. She's always been my confidant, the one person who knows how much I've sacrificed for Daniel. Over cups of tea at her kitchen table, I let the mask slip. I tell her about the envelopes, the missed gatherings, the way I feel like a stranger in my own family. Margaret listens quietly, her eyes full of sympathy and concern. You've given him everything, Evelyn, she says gently. Don't let anyone make you feel small for loving your son. Her words comfort me, but they don't erase the ache. I try to fill my days with small routines, gardening, volunteering at the library, meeting friends for lunch. But there's an emptiness that lingers, a sense that something precious has been lost. I watch other mothers with their grown children, laughing together in the park or shopping for groceries, and I wonder what I did wrong. Was I too protective? Not protective enough? Did I make Daniel feel guilty for his success, or did I fail to show him how proud I am? The doubts gnaw at me, especially on holidays and birthdays, when the absence of a simple phone call feels like a wound. I tell myself not to expect too much, not to let disappointment turn into resentment. But it's hard not to feel forgotten, especially when the only contact I have with Daniel comes through Clara's carefully curated gestures. I long for a real conversation, for a moment of honesty, for a sign that I still matter. The pain of betrayal was sharp, but beneath it, I felt something else stirring, a quiet resolve, a determination to reclaim my place in my own family. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I knew there would be consequences. But for the first time in years, I was ready to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I don't remember the last time I cried so hard. That night, after my talk with Daniel, I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside my window, and let the tears come. They weren't the quiet, dignified tears I'd learned to shed over the years, but the kind that rack your whole body, leaving you gasping and empty. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to steady the ache that seemed to have settled there for good. But I can tell something's wrong. Her words opened a floodgate. I found myself telling her everything: the money, the distance, the way I felt pushed aside. I tried to keep my voice steady, not wanting to burden her, but Emily listened with a seriousness far beyond her years. She reached for my hand, her grip warm and steady. You're not a burden, Grandma. You never have been. I love coming here. I love you. Tears pricked my eyes, but this time they were different, softer, lighter, touched with relief. Emily's presence was like a balm, soothing the raw places inside me. She told me about her life at university, her friends, her dreams. She asked for my advice, laughed at my stories, and reminded me of the joy I'd once found in simply being myself. As we talked, I realized how much I'd missed this: real connection, honest conversation, the feeling of being needed and valued. Emily didn't care about money or appearances. She wanted my time, my stories, my love. In her, I saw a future that wasn't defined by Clara's rules or Daniel's absence. I saw the possibility of a new beginning. Later, as we walked through the garden, Emily squeezed my arm. You know, Dad doesn't always see things clearly. He lets Clara make a lot of decisions, but that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. He's just lost, I think. But I see you, Grandma. I always have. Her words gave me strength I didn't know I still possessed. For so long, I'd let myself believe that my worth depended on Daniel's approval, on being included in his carefully curated life. But Emily reminded me that love isn't measured in invitations or gifts. It's found in the quiet moments, the shared laughter, the willingness to show up for each other. That evening, after Emily left, I sat in the garden and let the peace settle over me. The ache in my chest was still there, but it was softer now, tempered by hope. I realized I didn't have to accept the terms Clara had set. I could choose my own path, build my own connections, and reclaim the parts of myself I'd lost along the way. Emily's visit was a turning point. She called me the next day, and the day after that, sometimes just to say goodnight, sometimes to ask for advice about a class or a friend. Our bond grew stronger, a lifeline pulling me out of the darkness. I started reaching out to old friends, volunteering more at the library, saying yes to invitations I would have once declined. With every small step, I felt my confidence return. I was still Daniel's mother, still part of his story, but I no longer felt defined by his choices or Clara's control. I was my own person, worthy of love and respect, with or without their approval. Emily had given me that gift, the reminder that I mattered, that I was seen, that I was loved. For the first time in a long while, I looked toward the future with something like hope. I knew there would still be hard days, still moments of loneliness and doubt. But I also knew I wasn't alone. I had an ally, a granddaughter who saw me for who I truly was, and that was enough to help me find my strength again. For so long, I'd let myself be swept along by other people's decisions, by Daniel's silence, by Clara's control, by my own fear of making waves. But after Emily's visit, something inside me shifted. I realized I didn't have to accept the role I'd been given, didn't have to keep swallowing my feelings just to keep the peace. I was tired of being managed, tired of being grateful for scraps of attention. I wanted to be heard, to be seen, to matter on my own terms. The first step was the hardest. I sat at my kitchen table, the envelope from Clara still unopened, and picked up the phone. My hands shook as I dialed Daniel's number, but I forced myself to wait through the rings. When he answered, his voice was cautious, as if he already sensed a change in me. "Daniel, I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady. "Not about money, not about Clara, about us." He was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "Okay, Mom, I'm listening." I told him everything, how the money made me feel, how the distance had hurt me, how I missed the closeness we once shared. I didn't accuse or blame. I simply spoke my truth, letting the words fall where they may. I told him I didn't want any more checks, that I wanted a real relationship, not a transaction. I told him I loved him, but I needed to love myself too. Daniel was silent for a long time. I could hear the emotion in his breathing, the struggle in his voice when he finally spoke. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't realize how much this was hurting you. I thought I was making things easier, but I see now that I was just avoiding the hard conversations." His apology was a start, but I knew it would take time to rebuild what we'd lost. I told him I was willing to try, but only if things changed, only if we could be honest with each other, even when it was uncomfortable. He agreed, and for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope that our relationship could heal. The next time Clara tried to hand me an envelope, I smiled and gently pushed it back toward her. "Thank you, Clara, but I won't be accepting this anymore. I appreciate the gesture, but what I really want is to be part of your lives, not just a name on a check." She looked surprised, even a little offended, but I stood my ground. I realized then that I didn't need her approval, didn't need to explain myself. My boundaries were mine to set. With each small act of courage, I felt myself growing stronger. I started saying yes to things that brought me joy: lunches with friends, book club meetings, afternoons spent gardening or volunteering at the library. I stopped waiting for Daniel or Clara to invite me into their world and began building a world of my own. I reached out to old friends, rekindled relationships I'd let fade, and found comfort in the simple pleasures of my own company. I also made a point to nurture my bond with Emily. We talked often, sometimes about serious things, sometimes about nothing at all. She reminded me that I still had so much to give, so much to share. Her faith in me became a source of strength, a reminder that I was more than the sum of my disappointments. There were setbacks, of course. Some days the old doubts crept in, whispering that I was being selfish, that I should just accept what I was given. But I pushed those thoughts aside, reminding myself that self-respect isn't selfish, it's necessary. I learned to celebrate my small victories. The first time I said no without guilt. The first time I spoke my mind without fear. The first time I looked in the mirror and saw someone worthy of love. Reclaiming my voice didn't happen all at once. It was a process, a series of choices made day by day. But with each step, I felt the weight of the past begin to lift. I was no longer defined by what I'd lost, but by what I was choosing to build, a life rooted in honesty, in courage, in the quiet power of knowing my own worth. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was finally living for myself, on my own terms. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all. It was Daniel's birthday. and Clara had organized a dinner at their home, a rare occasion when the whole family, including Emily and a few close friends, would be together. I almost declined the invitation, wary of the tension that had simmered beneath the surface for so long, but something inside me insisted I go. I was tired of hiding, tired of pretending. If there was ever a time to speak my truth, it was now. The house was as immaculate as ever, every detail curated to perfection. Clara greeted me at the door, her smile polite but tight, and Daniel hovered behind her, looking distracted. Emily rushed over to hug me, her warmth a balm against the chill in the air. We made small talk as guests arrived, laughter and clinking glasses filling the spaces where real conversation should have been. Dinner was served at a long table set with fine china and crystal. Clara presided at one end, Daniel at the other, and I found myself seated between Emily and a distant cousin. The conversation flowed around me, but I felt like an outsider, watching my own family from a distance. I caught Daniel's eye a few times, but he always looked away, as if afraid of what he might see. As dessert was served, Clara stood to make a toast. She spoke about Daniel's achievements, their beautiful home, the life they'd built together. Her words were gracious, but there was an edge to them, a subtle reminder of her control. When she finished, Daniel thanked everyone for coming, his voice warm but weary. I knew this was my moment. My heart pounded as I stood, my hands trembling just enough to make me grip the edge of the table. The room quieted, all eyes turning to me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself with the memory of Emily's support, of the strength I'd found in reclaiming my voice. "I'd like to say something," I began, my voice clear but gentle. "I know this isn't easy, but I think it's time we talked honestly, as a family." Clara's smile faltered, and Daniel's brow furrowed. Emily reached for my hand under the table, her touch grounding me. As for Clara, our relationship remained polite but distant. I let go of the need to change her, to win her approval. I realized that family doesn't always look the way we expect, and that sometimes the healthiest thing we can do is accept people as they are, without resentment or regret. I filled my days with things that brought me joy, reading, painting, long walks in the park. I learned to savor solitude, to find comfort in my own company. I discovered that happiness isn't something that arrives all at once, but something we build, moment by moment, choice by choice. Looking back, I saw how far I'd come. The pain of exclusion, the ache of longing had given way to a quiet strength. I was no longer defined by what I'd lost, but by what I'd found: resilience, self-respect, and a renewed sense of purpose. I had learned to set boundaries, to speak my truth, to choose myself without guilt. Family, I realized, is not just the people we're born to, but the connections we nurture, the love we give and receive, the community we build around us. It's found in laughter shared over coffee, in the hands that help us plant a garden, in the children who look to us for guidance. It's found in the courage to begin again, no matter how many times we've been hurt. As the days grew longer and the world bloomed around me, I felt a sense of peace settle in my heart. I was not the same woman I'd been at the start of this journey. I was stronger, wiser, and more open to the possibilities of life. I knew there would still be challenges, still moments of doubt, but I also knew I had the strength to face them. With every sunrise, I embraced my new beginning, grateful for the lessons learned, the love rediscovered, and the hope that carried me forward. My story was not over. It was simply turning a new page, and I was ready to see what came next. If there's one thing this journey has taught me, it's that self-worth isn't something we earn from others. It's something we must claim for ourselves. For too long, I let fear and doubt keep me silent, believing that love meant accepting whatever was offered, even if it left me feeling small. But real love, I've learned, is built on honesty, respect, and the courage to set boundaries, even with the people closest to us. It's not easy to speak up, especially when you worry about rocking the boat or being misunderstood. But sometimes the only way to heal is to tell the truth, to yourself and to those you love. I discovered that it's possible to forgive without forgetting, to move forward without pretending the past didn't hurt. And I learned that it's never too late to reclaim your voice, to choose yourself, and to build a life that feels true. If you're reading this and you've ever felt sidelined or invisible in your own family, please know you're not alone. Your feelings matter. Your story matters. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is to ask for what you need, to draw a line, and to believe that you deserve more than just a place on the sidelines. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt sidelined by those you love most? How did you find your way back to yourself? Please share your story in the comments below. Your experiences might be the encouragement someone else needs to take their own first step. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more real life stories about family, resilience, and the power of speaking your truth.